Hello and welcome back. In today's video, we're going to be talking about what the heck could be going on if you are SIbo negative, but you're still bloated. So this goes out to all my people who have had SIbo. They treated the SIbo. It is eradicated. It's gone. You're SIbo negative, but you're still suffering with the same symptoms, or heck, maybe they're even a little bit worse. And we're going to primarily focus on the bloating, but keep in mind that this can also pertain to bowel movement changes or indigestion or other GI changes that you might experience with SIbo. So let's get into it. Why would you still have SIbo symptoms if your SIbo test just came back normal? All right, so I've drawn a little bit of a depiction, a chart, a graph, if you will, to show us where we're going. So point A is you just tested negative for SIbo. You're still bloated and you're thinking, WTF, what is going on with my life? So you're here right now, presumably, if you're watching this video, and there's two overarching possibilities that I want to talk about in this video with you. Number one is it might be, the first kind of bifurcation, if you will, is it might be a problem with the testing that you received. And this can go one of two ways. So there's 2 points under here that I want to talk about. The first one is that your first test was incorrect or inaccurate. The second possibility is that your new test, presumably your second test, but it could be your third or your fourth, whatever it might be. In this case, I'm going to keep it simple. The other possibility is that your second test is incorrect. So what do I mean by this? And admittedly, this is the answer that probably not a lot of you want to hear. You're probably more expecting this side of it, but we're going to get to that in just a minute. So SIbo testing, I probably don't have to tell you, but I will anyway, is notoriously craptacular. It's awful, you guys, like it's terrible. But the key here is we use it anyway because it's what we've got. We don't have anything else. We have aspirate studies, which are mostly unavailable to the general public, and for doctors like me, these are mostly going to be done with like a hospital or a research study. A lot of normal people don't get aspirates of their small bowel to assess for SIbo. What mostly happens is that you either get a breath test or your doctor says, hey, I think you have SIbo, let's treat for it. And they give you the rifaximin or the candibactin or whatever it might be. So mostly I'm talking about breath testing here, but please keep in mind that aspirate testing is far from perfect and still very widely debatable. And that's a whole nother topic. I probably won't cover it, honestly, on YouTube because this is more of where I put content for my normal folk and the people who are struggling with SIbo. But it is something I'm going to talk a lot in my upcoming practitioner course. So that is something for those of you who might be healthcare practitioners, you might want to look into. I'll be announcing that and sharing the link for registration in the next couple weeks. But anyway, let's get back to this. So assuming that you had a breath test specifically in this case, because that's 99% of you, there's a possibility that your first SIbo test that diagnosed you with SIbo was a false positive. This is very much a case for lactulose, to a point where, honestly, I'm getting to a point where I will almost never use lactulose again. With very few exceptions, I do not intend to order a lot of lactulose breath testing because I've been doing more of a deep dive on the sensitivity and specificity and the accuracy of it and the utility of using this as a SIbo test. Again, kind of prepping for the upcoming practitioner training course. And it is terrible. It's just awful, you guys. It is not accurate. There are numerous studies and numerous authors screaming from the rooftops that we should not be using lactulose to assess for SIbo, and it is not accurate in any way, shape, or form. But we're doing it anyway. Lactulose breath testing makes up, I think, like 60% of the breath testing that's done in the United States. So it's still very, very common, and it should not be. So again, particularly lactulose. So I'm just going to put an L here because it's a bit more of an issue with lactulose, but glucose is not off the hook. There's a possibility that your first test that diagnosed you with SIbo was actually a false positive, in which case treating the SIbo wouldn't yield benefit, right? Like if you have a false positive and you're told that you have SIbo when you actually do not, and then you treat the SIbo, would you expect to feel better? It's, to use something really absurd, it's almost like if you were told you had cancer, but you did not actually have cancer, and then you did chemotherapy, would you expect to feel any better? No, that would be kind of dumb, right? not from any of your doing. Like, you just went off of the test you were given. It was your doctor's responsibility to talk to you about the accuracy and the utility of that test. But I'm just saying, like, using that absurd example, it would be silly to undergo chemotherapy and expect to feel better if you didn't actually have cancer. So similarly, if you don't actually have SIbo, are we surprised that you're still bloated? I don't think so. So that's possibility number one. That's probably the least popular answer I could give in this video, and we're just coming right out the gate with the one that you're going to hate. The other possibility under this kind of bullet point is that the new test that you just got done, the one that said you're free of SIbo, might be a false negative. This is going to be a bit more common with glucose. Again, it's not to say lactulose is off the hook here either, but I think that typically lactulose overdiagnoses SIbo. Glucose is a little bit hit and miss either direction, but it's entirely possible that your new test that said that you are free of SIbo is actually a false negative and that you still in fact have SIbo. I think that's what a lot of people are probably going to assume. Actually, it's probably a tie between that one and the next one we're going to talk about. I think the key here is that if you are assuming that this is the case, that you have a false negative on the new breath test that you had done, my question to you would be, did you feel better when you were treating the SIbo? Like when you took the rifaximin or the candibactin or the SIbo or the whatever, did you actually feel better? If you felt better and then you felt worse when you discontinued that treatment, then I would think that lends a little bit more credibility to this hypothesis, although not entirely. A lot of people don't realize, as a side note, that rifaximin does more than just kill bacteria. It's not purely an antibiotic. There's also some evidence mounting now that rifaximin has anti-inflammatory and immune modulating activities in and around the gut and the body. So it's entirely possible that some people feel a symptomatic benefit from rifaximin because of the anti-inflammatory effect, not the antimicrobial effect. That's another story for another day. It's fascinating, but that's a side tangent. But anyway, I will say, I think that if you felt better while taking the treatment for the SIbo, and then the symptoms came back, that would lend a little bit more credibility to this. However, if you did this treatment for SIbo, whether it be candibactin or rifaximin or whatever, if you did the treatment for SIbo and you did not feel better, I would start really leaning into this one and thinking, maybe you didn't have SIbo. Like maybe that was a false positive and you were chasing the wrong thing all along, right? Like you would think that the treatment would make you feel better if you actually had that condition. So that's what I have to say on the testing. Again, it's entirely possible that you had a false positive or a false negative. Mostly that's going to be false positives are more going to be a thing with lactulose. Glucose is not totally off the hook, but it's more of a thing with lactulose. And you are more likely to have a false negative with glucose. Again, lactulose is not off the hook here, but that's just a general kind of rule of thumb. And I will make a note here too. So false positive versus false negative. Now the other bifurcation, so again, you're here, you're SIbo negative, but you're still bloated and you are watching my video trying to get answers. The first kind of bifurcation here, the first option is, hey, maybe it's a problem with the testing. We talked about those. The other possibility over here, and I guess I could even add a third here, but they kind of fall together anyway, is A, SIbo wasn't your only problem. I don't want to write that all out. I'll just write mo probs. So SIbo was not your only problem, or there are some root causal issues that you have yet to address. And I think, again, I think that you could kind of lump those together. It's a slightly different way of thinking about it, right? Because you could think of, okay, you have more problems. Say you have candida overgrowth in addition to SIbo. Well, you could actually make the argument that the candida and the SIbo might have the same root cause. So if you treat the upstream root cause, you might actually hit both nails on the head with that one. But that's just one example. So again, maybe there's something else going on. Maybe you have celiac disease or Crohn's disease or leaky gut or candida Or maybe you have dysbiosis, not just a pure overgrowth, as we tend to think of SIbo. Maybe you have some digestive insufficiency issues, like you don't have enough HCl or enough bile or enough enzymes. Maybe you're not chewing your food enough and you're rushing through all of your meals. Maybe you are never getting into rest and digest mode because you're so stressed, or you're around people that just drive you nuts all the time and you're not getting into rest and digest mode. Hormones could play a role, particularly estrogen for women. Thyroid hormone, potentially. You can kind of start seeing how this bubbles out into something much, much bigger. And it really boils back to just treat the whole body. If you find dysfunction or problems or inadequacy in the body or in your nutrition, start addressing those things and just see what happens. It might really help your gut more than you realize. I will also put in a plug, as I almost always do, for motility. I've said it in so many videos. I feel like I'm a broken record, but I'm going to say it again anyway. So remember my horrifying little depiction of the gut. So we've got the brain, mouth, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, colon. Colon is scribbled with green because of all the bacteria that live there. And as long as we have a nice flow of current going from mouth to anus, never the other direction and never getting stagnant, then you're going to successfully keep the majority of your bacteria down in the colon and everybody's hunky-dory. However, the moment you have poor motility, if you have stagnation or backflow, if your motility starts going out the window, these bacteria are really, really smart, and they understand that the food comes out of that hole, not that hole. So the bacteria are smart enough that they want to be closer to the food, and they can start creeping up into the small intestine. Wham bam, now you got SIbo. So remember the importance of motility and really getting that current. It's like a river or a stream. You want the current to go one direction at all times, never the other direction, and you don't want the water to be stagnant and mucky. So things that will influence motility go a long way too, and I think that is still really underutilized in the SIbo space. And I'm still seeing, even 6 months ago, I remember talking about this on the podcast, I saw a very prominent internet celebrity doctor figure who made himself well known for SIbo. Like, that was his thing. And it still kind of is. Like, his thing is still largely SIbo. And I think he's pretty good, but honestly, like, he made a point of specifically saying that if you have SIbo, you shouldn't bother taking prokinetics. But then he's willing to sell you his elemental diet formula, which, don't get me started on that. But like, how would a SIbo patient not benefit from prokinetics or motility aid when, in my opinion, the entire problem is this current issue, this motility issue? If you get the motility humming along, you don't have to worry nearly as much about bacterial overgrowth. I really mind-boggled that he said that. And that was in 2022, that was recently. So I think that because some professionals out there who are very well respected still poo-poo the idea, and maybe for other reasons as well, not everybody is thinking about the motility. So I'm going to keep harping it on my channel and my podcast until the cows come home, because I think it's really, really important. So remember, again, particularly with bloating as a specific symptom, start thinking about things like prokinetics, start thinking about things like digestive bitters, eating bitter food, mindful eating, and just giving yourself the time and the space and the quietness to just enjoy your meal and savor your meal and like get all of that sensory experience from your meal, the taste, the texture, the temperature, all of the things that we could perceive and kind of cue in our nervous system that there's food coming in. Think about vagus nerve kind of stuff. Because remember, the whole reason I drew the brain up there is because the vagus nerve comes out of your brainstem and it goes down and innervates or controls all of your innards. So it's controlling the esophagus, the lower esophageal sphincter, the stomach, the pyloric sphincter, the small intestine, and 1/3 of the colon. And then the rest of the colon is different set of nerves, but that's not terribly important right now. So the vagus nerve is tremendously important. And a lot of us are walking around with really crappy vagal tone. and we wonder why we can't get into rest and digest. So keep that in mind, again, particularly with bloating. The last thing I want to mention, and this is last on the list in my opinion, but it is something to have on your radar, is I do think that there's a conversation around hormones and adhesions. I don't think you're doomed forever if you have adhesions. I know a lot of people feel that way. And I don't think that they're a very common root cause, actually. I think that adhesions are a fairly uncommon root cause for SIbo. It gets talked about a lot, though. But I know I've had some patients, for example, with endometriosis where, like I remember one woman, and she had the laparoscopy done, and they removed the endometriosis lesions, and she felt phenomenal. And her bloating was completely gone for like 3 blissful days, and then it came back. But that was the only thing that's helped her, the one and only thing in all this time. And so, you know, we could do things either for the adhesions or the hormones or a little bit of both. So if you're thinking more along the lines of adhesions, like if you've had abdominal surgeries or C-sections or something like that, you could start mobilizing the area, doing some visceral manipulation. I actually have some videos on this channel showing you how to do visceral manipulation on your own to at least get you a little bit of a start on that front. For the hormones, there's a lot that can be done from a natural perspective, but I do think that's where getting at least a little bit of testing can help you understand what the hormones are up to and what you need to target most efficiently. But that's a consideration as well, particularly with bloating, because again, I'll just never forget that story when she said, I remember I saw her for an appointment. It was 3 days after the endometriosis laparoscopy. And she was like, I'm done, I'm cured. I feel amazing. My bloating is gone for the first time in my life. This is phenomenal. Thank you. And I was like, yeah, totally. You're great. You're welcome. And then like a week or two later, she was on my schedule again. And I was like, why are we talking? Because I thought you were doing great. And she told me that it came back. So we're still kind of unfolding that one a bit, but just putting out a plug, adhesions and maybe hormones, I've seen at least at that time and maybe a couple more times where it seemed directly related to bloating. So don't count that out too. And again, going back to my broken record, the entire body matters, right? Like we tend to not me, but like a lot of people in this space tend to hyper focus on the gut. And that's okay to a certain point. But if you hyper focus on the gut and you have wonky hormones and you're not addressing the wonky hormones, your gut might not get better. If you're focusing entirely on your gut, but your stress is through the roof and you're not addressing your stress, your gut might not ever get better. So we really need to look at the entire person, your entire human experience, and try to figure out where are there windows of opportunity where we can help you function better and help your body be healthier and more in balance. And then if we can get you closer to that, I think that that will greatly help your gut in a lot of cases. But like I said, I think that that's a little bit lost in the SIbo space oftentimes where people want to hyper focus on the gut. Thank you so much for tuning in. I cannot wait to share an upcoming stool test experiment with you guys. Oh, it's gonna be drama. I can't wait. And it's gonna blow up in the functional medicine world. This is gonna be an expose. I'm super pumped about it. Also a little bit nervous because there might be a little bit of backlash, but that's okay. That's okay. I know it's for a good cause and you guys need this information, honestly, because it's pretty earth-shattering. So I'm really hoping to have that video up in the next week or so. Thank you, as always, for staying tuned and watching this video. I really hope it helped. Again, I know that this side of the equation, nobody really wanted to hear about. That's really disappointing, but I would rather be truthful than sugarcoat things on this channel. And I think that this is a very real thing for a lot of you too, but I thought that both of these were important to mention, and I hope that one or both of these were helpful for you in your journey, and I hope that you can figure out your gut and what it needs in order to be healthy. For those of you who don't know, I actually recently started a Patreon. So going back to my crazy stool test experiment, this is my version of being a researcher. But like I tend to do research or I'm interested in questions that traditional funding sources just would never fund, right? Like I can't ask Pfizer to fund my poop test experiment and test out different prebiotics. Like there's no money in it for them, so they would never fund it. But I think it's really important that I try to get some of this information out, especially this new one that's coming up in the next week or two. I think it's really important for this information to get out there and into your hands and into practitioners' hands so that you guys can really navigate this and get better. But I will say I'm paying for all these stool tests out of my own pocket. So at the suggestion of one of my wonderful viewers, I decided to make a Patreon. And there's 3 different levels. There's a just want to support the channel, kind of thank you nod tier, I think they're called, tier. There's a tier with Discord access, and there's a tier where we could do monthly Q&A together. So you can take a look. The link is down in the description down below. As always, thank you so much for tuning in, regardless of if you join the Patreon or not. And I will look forward to seeing you in the next video. Hey guys, if you like this video, be sure to subscribe, ring the bell, click the like button, and leave a comment down below with the videos that you would like to see me do next. Doing all of those really helps support the channel and support my efforts in making as many videos as possible for you guys. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next video.